Good morning, everybody. This is a little bit of a back in time, how Saturday Matters evolved, and Lester was part of that. I think most of you know that Lester turned 100.
It was a hard job, but I worked hard.
and I'm just so impressed that he can get up here and give us another talk, and it's by request a reprise of one he gave that was before my time. Saturday Matters used to be called Current Issues, and it was run by the late Jim Voss and Lester, and Lester would usually offer some information about what's going on in the world of science. And one day he gave one about the naked mole rat that proved to be so memorable that someone who was there, it must have been like at least 8 years ago, asked to have it again. And I got curious about the naked mole rat too, so I said, "Oh, Lester, please, 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 please." He was a little reluctant at first, but I begged. So I am going to sit down and be quiet and show a picture now and then, and Lester will tell us why the naked mole rat is such a fascinating, if not necessarily attractive creature. Go ahead, Lester.
Well, I can tell you that the attractiveness doesn't really matter because mole rats are virtually blind, so they don't mind what their kids look like. By the way, how many of you have ever heard of the naked mole rat before? No, things are picking up. Well, this is what they look like. I want to call your attention to just one thing. There are other features, anatomical features that I will mention from time to time, but the interesting thing here is that they're very wrinkled, as you can see. This is not an old naked mole rat. And we'll get into aspects of that wrinkling later on. The next slide shows us somewhat more realistic, for less sort of peeking out of its domain. They live in a network of tunnels that they create, and I'll get into that too. But here you can note especially the most distinguishing feature is the teeth. There are 2 upper teeth and 2 lower teeth, huge teeth, and I'll explain why in a little bit. The natural environment, next please, is in the Horn of Africa. In the upper left-hand corner in red shows the region of Africa that's involved, and the larger image shows you the countries where they are found and nowhere else in the world, in nature at any rate. You can see it's Eritrea and Djibouti and Ethiopia, some in Kenya, Somalia, and Uganda, and nowhere else except in zoos. I don't think they're found in this zoo, as far as I know, our local zoo, but I can assure you they will be found in the San Diego Zoo and in the National Zoo in D.C. The naked mole rat is the only creature that I know of that has this amazing array of remarkable features not found in any other organism known to humankind. There may be one or two of these remarkable features found in an animal here or there, but not as many and as in such abundance. Other kinds of naked mole rats, no, not naked mole rats, sort of related mole rats live in the Mediterranean area, around the rim, in the Middle East, in other parts of Africa, and I'll mention one of them later. Naked mole rats are unambiguously mammals. I want to make a personal digression here. It's kind of amusing. I went to a excellent high school in New York City, but they didn't have any biology. I should also note that some of you may recall that I used to make a living as a professor of biology at one university or another. But I didn't have any biology in high school. And time went on. I spent 3 years in the U.S. Army. And when I returned to education under the GI Bill after World War II, I finally took a biology class in my first year. I was then 22 years old. And in the first lab we had, the instructor said, in the course of whatever he was talking about, that mammals are characterized by having hair and mammary glands. And in my great ignorance, I turned to this young, buxom young lady next to me and said, "What are mammary glands?" And her response was, "Oh, cut it out." I immediately knew what they were. I just called them by other names. The naked mole rats have very little hair. In fact, you couldn't have noticed it on the images that were shown. But they do have hair, so they qualify in that regard. The few hairs they have probably serve for detecting objects in their environment. They're for sensory purposes. And this is very useful for them because they're, as I mentioned, they're virtually blind. They certainly have very poor vision, although they have normal-looking eyes. And that's okay because they spend most of their lives in this network of tunnels that they dig at the place to live their lives. They are about the size of a house mouse. You know, next, it shows you, gives you a sense of how big they are. And that's an adult of the naked mole rat. They live in these underground tunnels which they themselves dig, and they live as a colony. A colony may dig tunnels to a great extent, some extending a total of 2 to 3 miles of digging. And they're very elaborate tunnels as well, with different kinds of chambers. Let me tell you a little bit more about their anatomy. Their teeth, which are the most prominent feature, are used primarily for digging the tunnels and harvesting food. The food is primarily roots and tubers of plants which grow on the ground. And the teeth can be used independently of one another, almost like chopsticks. And the mouth is structured in such a way that it can be kept closed while the digging is going on, so they don't swallow the dirt they're digging up. So much effort seems to be devoted to moving those teeth that essentially a third of their musculature, the total body musculature, is in the head area of the naked mole rat. It would appear on the surface that they do not need to have vision, but because they live in this dark on the ground, they can't see anything. As a result of that, as a matter of fact, they move forward and backward with equal ease because they don't have to see what they're doing, they feel what they're doing. But there are two circumstances when they may need to have some vision, and I'll talk about that later. They eat only these roots and tubers, but they never drink. They get enough water from the roots and tubers that they never drink. They harvest much more than they eat. They harvest much more than they eat, and they store that in what we would call pantries, chambers off the tunnels. If they encounter a very large tuber, they will, I don't know what the tubers are down in that part of Africa, but say it were a turnip, a large turnip, something like that, they will take out the innards of the tuber and eat what they need and store the rest, but they keep the tuber alive. I mean, they don't keep it alive, but they don't kill the tuber. So the tuber keeps growing, and they keep harvesting it, and so they have if they're lucky enough, they have a regular supply of food. They go above ground primarily to dump the earth that they have dug and have to dispose of it somehow when they go above ground to do that. But there is one other circumstance that I'll get to later that is not well characterized, but seems to be essential when they do go above ground. Nothing to do with dumping the earth. They are the only mammals known to engage in a lifestyle involving diurnal rhythms, working as we do during the day. Most of us work during the day and rest the rest of the day. We do that rhythmically, usually on a 24-hour scale. Naked mole rats are the only mammals known that don't have that kind of pattern. They're active when they have the need or urge for a while, and then they'll rest, sleep, or whatever, repeatedly during the day. And they, of course, don't know when it's daytime or nighttime. They don't see the light. And so they just have a very aperiodic, if you will, lifestyle. I'll take up the subject of procreation later. Let's begin to look at the really remarkable features of the naked mole rats. Any organism, well, mostly rodents, that are the size of the naked mole rat, like a house mouse, that size, has a lifespan of 2 to 3 years. That's pretty universal through nature. The naked mole rat, which has garnered so much attention, has a lifespan of at least 30 years. Some people say maybe it's almost 40 years, but it's not well characterized, but at least 30 years. That drew attention to the naked mole rat immediately. That a remarkable feature. All mammals except the naked mole rat are warm-blooded creatures, so-called homeothermic organisms. They generally maintain a normal body temperature regardless of the environment, although when it gets very extreme, very hot or very cold, and it becomes more difficult. But generally, in most of the environmental temperatures that mammals encounter, they are able to maintain a body temperature, a constant body temperature, but that's not true for the naked mole rat, which just adapts to whatever temperature is there, like a snake or a frog or whatever, non-mammal creatures, except one thing, if it gets well, first of all, they can move around in chamber and find a more comfortable temperature if they need to. But if it gets pretty chilly down there, then they will do what many humans do, and they will huddle together in bunches to maintain the body heat that they are able to generate. Their oxygen metabolism is amazing. They live normally in a low oxygen environment in the tunnels, and they have adapted to be dependent on much less oxygen in the atmosphere than other mammals. Let me give you some numbers. At the extreme, they can live without oxygen, no oxygen, zero, for 18 minutes at least. I mean, they're in fact fairly normal in their behavior and so on in the absence of oxygen for 18 minutes, and may survive as long as 30 minutes. I don't know about you, but if I had to hold my breath for a minute and a half when I was a teenager, I thought it was pretty good. But there are other things about the oxygen environment, and which is more relevant. The oxygen level in their habitat, in the tunnels, it tends to be rather low, not as the 21% that exists in the atmosphere here. And as far as investigators have been able to determine they can live in 5% oxygen in their tunnels indefinitely and continue to function. Humans at the extreme, for example, at high mountain altitudes, like at Mount Everest, where the concentration of oxygen is about 7% in the atmosphere. Humans can only survive for a few minutes without supplementary oxygen. So they have a remarkable hemoglobin. That much is known, that can handle deal with low levels of oxygen. Strange to me, and I don't know how extensively this has been studied, but naked mole rats are presumably immune to pain. Now, I don't know if that's, from what I read, it's not clear to me whether that's all kinds of pain, but there are certain kinds of pain that they do not experience when we would experience it, or any other mammal would. That might sound like a good thing, but for us it's not a good thing. People have been known to be born without pain receptors or being insensitive to pain, which, you know, sounds like a terrific thing. But those people don't live very long because being insensitive to pain, they don't know how to avoid certain hazards, and their life is relatively short. It's not a good mutation to have. One minor feature, I'll get back to more serious features, is noted by one investigator who said that naked mole rats, in contrast to, I guess, almost all other creatures, sleep on their backs. That may be true, but generally, but I must be a freak because I sleep on my back quite a lot. Another feature they have that has drawn a great deal of attention is that naked mole rats are resistant to cancer. Been a lot of research on that. In fact, I don't know, I wish I could quantitate for you how much research, but I'm sure it's easy to get a grant if you have a decent proposal about how to study cancer in naked mole rats. It was originally thought that they had no cancers, that they never had any, but there have been a few cases now found, and I mean very few cases. But these are in lab environments, because they're raising naked mole rats in laboratories for research purposes, and a couple of cases have been found. It's clear that they have a very low incidence of cancer. And that, of course, may account for some of the longevity that they experience. Interestingly, naked mole rats show very little signs of aging. I'm going to continue with the cancer story in a bit. If you are studying naked mole rats in the lab, over the course of years, they don't seem to change. They don't get gray hair, obviously, or maybe they do and they can't tell because there's so few hairs there. And they don't get wrinkled, they're already wrinkled. Other signs of aging are not evident at all until almost the time they die. Some people might think they're immortal, but that's not the case. The ability to resist cancer is obviously a very attractive subject for investigators. And I will just give you a hint of some of the things that are suspected, that are involved in cancer immunity, if you will, of the naked mole rat. They have a gene, or genes, not well characterized, that seem to block the proliferation of cells when they get too crowded. In humans, and maybe there is such gene or genes in humans, but if they are there, they become ineffective. Maybe they mutate those genes that suppress the replication of cells when they get too crowded. You know, that's a good thing, but if a gene like that mutates and doesn't provide that control, then the cells will continue to proliferate and become cancerous. That's one area of interest. Another is mammals have produced a very large molecule. I can't tell you the size of it, but I neglected to check it, called, I have trouble pronouncing it too, hyaluronan. Anybody know that? Hyaluronan, which is apparently involved in regulating cell proliferation in many creatures. And the naked mole rat, that molecule, which is very large in other mammals, is 5 times larger than other mammals have it. And that may play a role in cancer suppression. Last year, some scientists reported that when the gene for making that molecule, the naked mole rat gene for making that molecule, is transplanted into mice. The mice seem to be healthier as a result and live longer. Not a lot longer, but 4.4% longer lifespan if they have the naked mole rat gene for that molecule. The machinery that produces proteins in cells, called ribosomes, for those of you who are familiar with that. The machinery in naked mole rats is less error-prone than are the ribosomes that make proteins in all other mammals. In other words, the machinery is much more accurate for some reason or other. And of course, if the proteins are not normal, they too could be responsible for cancers. And this is also true for the replication of the DNA in mammals. Many of cancers are results from errors in the making of new DNA, the replication of DNA. And those errors can lead to cancer production. Naked mole rats have the machinery that is much more accurate, is less error-prone than is the case in other mammals. why this is so is not known, at least as far as I'm aware, and it probably will be known in short order, but right now I don't think it's known. I'm left, when I hear these things, with the question of why are these very desirable traits, protecting against errors in the cell machinery, not more widely distributed and increased? Why don't we have better error correction and naked mole rats? You don't have to tell me right now. As soon as you can, let me know. I want to finish off with a quite remarkable, but not quite unique characteristic of naked mole rats. They live in a society, the colony in which they live functions as a eusocial society. That's spelled E-U-S-O-C-I-A-L. Eusocial. Other creatures, not mammals, live in a eusocial societies. Ants, bees, termites, mostly insects. Oh, it's not only, mostly invertebrates, because there are some marine organisms that do it as well. But generally, most of us who know anything about that subject know that they exist in bees and ants and termites and so on. And a eusocial society is one in which there is a division of labor based on, in a community based on, well, I don't know what it's based on, but consisting of a queen bee, for example, in a hive, some males who serve in reproductive use functions. Most of the colony is involved as a labor force, and some other members of the society are soldiers, if you will, protecting the colony. That is true for naked mole rats, but it's not the only mammal that does that. There's one other known, and that is the Damaraland Damaraland mole rat. There it is. Notice it, first off, it's not naked, right? Got lots of hair. But you can see a resemblance, they're related, obviously. They live in southern Africa. Scientists believe that they and the naked mole rat probably diverged about 20 million years ago in the course of evolution. They too have a eusocial society. Other than that, there's not much that I need to dwell on in that regard. So the average naked mole rat colony, and I want to emphasize this, the average, is about 75 individuals. There may, in some cases, maybe it's hundreds, but mostly the average is 75, and so most colonies are in that range. The queen is the only member of the colony who bears offspring, and is usually served by 3 males for reproductive purposes. The remainder of the colony members are divided into 2 groups: workers who dig the tunnels and harvest the food and such, and soldiers who protect the colony. The dangers for naked mole rats, the predators, are mostly snakes that can wiggle their way into the tunnels. And so the soldiers of the colony are expected to ward them off. There probably are other roles that are not well characterized. There may be, for example, roles in for some of the workers to help in the raising of care and feeding of newborns. Apparently it's a little too subtle for some of the investigators to be sure about that. So there may be a few other creatures, roles that are played, but are, as I say, too subtle. How does one become a queen? Well, in a naked mole rat colony, queen is selected by herself by fighting off other female naked mole rats. It's a battle. And it's almost a constant battle, or can be, because there's no inherited status. And if another female naked mole rat decides that she'd like to be the queen, then she will fight for it. And so there's a fair bit of turnover there, relatively speaking. And the queen's lifespan is considered to be about, I think, 15 to 18 years. They don't live as long because they're fighting so much. When a female becomes a queen, she increases in size substantially. Not seen any images of a queen, naked mole rat, but because they become larger, it may be that the wrinkles disappear, and that's why they have such a loose makeup of the skin in the first place. But I don't know about that. The queen produces about 4 litters a year. It certainly varies, but on average it's about 4. And the litter size averages about 12 offspring. So, if you do the high math on that, you see that there may be 40 to 50 newborns every year in a colony consisting of 75 individuals who live a very long time. There's a problem there. And I have not seen it addressed. But it is apparently observed that the males who service the queen are not members of biological relatives of that particular colony. They are strangers, which is a very good thing, because you don't want inbreeding. You don't want a member with the same genetic makeup fertilizing the eggs of the queen. So we have a problem there. Where do the strangers come from? And what happens to this high rate of reproduction with very little increase in the size of the colony? So that implies there are times when some of the creatures leave the colony and go into the light to find another place to live. So the eyes may be useful at that point. I have seen nothing about the process, but you have to believe that if two things, if there are strangers who are mating with the queen, which is good because you don't want inbreeding, and if the size of the colony has to be maintained at a decent level, you have to have some kind of migration. And maybe that's when the eyes come into good use, because they have to leave the tunnels and find someplace else. And with that, I think I shall turn to, did you get the video?
Yeah, you want to see.
We got a little dessert here in the form of a very brief video.
That is not a naked mole rat. There. Looks like it's having fun. Lots and lots of videos on that Smithsonian site.
This was a whole bunch of them. Yes, big crowds and people runs.
Sorry. Okay.
That's it.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester. Comments or questions? Lester?
So Lester, a simple question. How did you get interested in naked mole rats?
How could I not be interested? I mean, it's certainly far from my general professional interest. I was a cell biologist. It is not, whatever happened, I came across something 10 or so years ago, and I thought, this is an astonishing creature, and I have to read about it, but it's certainly not my line of work.
Suzanne, and then
Do naked mole rats talk to one another? What noise do they make?
Do they talk to them?
Well,
I don't know how they probably do communicate, and I did read that there are recognizable about 16 or 17 different words, if you will. I don't know, some kind of communication. Whether it really is that, I don't think it's been well studied, but they do. Some investigators have found that they make about a dozen and a half different kinds of sounds, which may be part of communication. And you know, they're very intimately associated, so there may be physical signals, but I don't really know.
Lester, I may have missed it, but I wondered about the predators, because you think with the rate of longevity and the rate of reproduction that parts of Africa would be overrun with mole rats.
All I know is when in answer to that, I can't really answer it fully, but the only thing that I know is that it is the least threatened creature. It's in a category. There are categories of how threatened different species are. You know, they're at one extreme, they're close to being extinct. At the other extreme, there's no problem. They're at the end of the spectrum where nobody's worried about them going extinct or anywhere near that. So they do very well. How much they spread out, I don't know.
Well, I have a related question. They live and exist in a very large, complex ecosystem. What would you say or might say is their specific role in that ecosystem? What would happen if naked mole rats ceased to exist?
I have no idea. I haven't come across anything about what role they might play in the lives of other species.
And when you showed the video of the naked mole rat gathering food, it had a tail, but the first picture you had of the mole rat doesn't have a tail.
Yes, it didn't show, but normally they have tails.
Okay, and the second question was, at some point, did you drop the word egg?
Egg?
Did you say the word egg during your...
Egg?
No.
No, okay, good.
No.
As far as I know, they don't lay eggs. Okay, let's see. Okay.
Anybody on it? Yeah, 2 points. I kind of expected you to say that the unrelated males would kill offspring as lions do when they take over a pride.
I didn't read anything about what happens when a stranger enters the colony. But it's a good point. I would think well, maybe there is some kind of tolerance of strangers that would not be for snakes or other invaders. But I didn't read anything about that.
Another point concerning pain. I have a colleague who says butterflies cannot feel pain. He says it would do them absolutely no good, so selection has never favored it.
Huh. Wow.
Take it or leave it.
I have a question. Do you know how long naked mole rats have been studied by scientists? I had the impression that they have not been a research subject for many years, which is maybe why there's...
I don't think, well, in terms of the kind of intense, more biochemical studies, they are relatively recent. When I talked, did you check out was I talked about it before? 10 years ago?
Yeah, it was 8 to 10 years ago, as best we can figure out.
There was very little on the molecular aspects
Okay.
of the naked mole rat. Much more now.
So,
I have 2 questions. One is, in the very first, when you were showing pictures of the naked mole rat, it looked like it had a rounded bottom, or I was wondering what was in that. I mean, it didn't look like a tail. And was that the abdomen of the rat? Yeah.
I don't know. I haven't come across anything about that.
Huh.
I don't know.
And did you say that they did have a tail?
Yes.
So where was the tail?
Hidden.
Oh, it's hidden. Okay.
Tail.
And my second question had to do with that slide that showed the mole rat coming out and selecting some food, the video. It looked like, I mean, there was lots of different colors, and it looked like those were pieces of food that had been set out of different colors. I don't know if anybody else saw that, but that's what I thought that was, when they come out, they were selecting color, and they're supposed to be blind.
Well, that was a stage scene up. I mean, that had no relation to reality.
Oh,
in their normal environment, they don't see anything like that.
That is a colony.
The only food they have are roots from plants and tube roots, which are large roots essentially.
So why was it staged?
It's a colony that lives in the National Zoo, operated by the Smithsonian, and they have a webcam on it. Probably the colors have nothing to do with what the mole rats want. They just want it to look interesting for the rest of us.
Do mole rats have eyelids?
Have what?
Eyelids.
Islands?
Eyelids. Yeah.
Eyelids?
So they can close their eyes.
I never looked.
My question has to do with the population of the mole rats, because they've got one queen. She produces 4 times a year, more or less, and I don't know how large the litter is, but it seems to me if they live 30 years, I don't know how many queens they go through, but is there any concern? What happens to the population? Seems like, as someone else mentioned, we would be overrun by naked mole rats. So do they kill? Do they die from lack of resources? Or
that's why I think there has to be some kind of migration. I didn't read anything, any observations about this, but I would think that there comes a time when the population size is so large that as they hold a town meeting, you have to have 50 volunteers to move out and form a new colony somewhere.
We don't have to worry about them invading here. Our environment is not very conducive.
I don't know if others recall it, but some years ago, maybe a couple of decades, there was a mole rat on the cover of Science or some other major magazine on April Fool's Day. And the story some people suckered for said, well, this lady was studying penguins and suddenly some of them disappeared beneath the ice. And there was a strange predator that was pulling them under and eating them, and it went on from there. And a lot of people believed it, and of course the letters to the editor were bizarre.
I suppose you could think maybe someone invented it and photoshopped an image.
Do they have normal organs as we do, like livers and kidneys and...
I expect they do, but I didn't actually come across anything much about their internal organs. But I suspect they have the usual assortment, maybe not different someplace here or there, but mostly they would be like most other mammals.
Anyone else? Okay, it's 11:30. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Wes.